Hi everyone, I'm Michelle Renee Hyatt. Welcome to Tutorial Tuesday. We are on week 6. I can't believe it. I'd like to say time is flying, but time is flying on this project. How's that? So today we're going to work on putting together the Bloom V-Star block. And it comes together with our V-block units and then our petal square squares. So we are going to get started. I have a lot of good pointers for you on precision piecing as well as proper ironing. There's a surprise, right? Anyhow, we're gonna have a lot of fun. So let's get started. Okay, so before I start sewing, I transfer my stacks over by my sewing machine and I lay them out as the block will come together. Again, this is really important for keeping our orientation and ensuring that we're putting the block back together. And what I will do is I will go and put together my rows, and then I will put the rows together. And in between, I will come back and lay it out to make sure that I'm putting the proper row in the proper place. Have I messed up? Of course. But I find that if I take the time to actually lay it back down exactly as it should be put together, and then lift it, flip it, pin it, and sew it, that I have a much better accuracy rate. Okay, so I want to talk to you about the key points here that you might want to pin. When I'm putting together my units, it's very, very rare for me to pin. However, when I put my units together into a block and then my block together into a quilt, I always pin. At that point, I say you can either pin it now or rip it later if you are particular like myself. So we're going to pin. And there's a couple junctions here that really need some attention. And that is where our V centers, the center point in our V block unit, come together with our square and a square. Those 2 points should line up perfectly in the seam, and their points should match. If there's a thread or two extra, it doesn't really bother me as much as if I were to drop that point. And so that's this point and this point that I wouldn't want to drop. Now, since I'm going to go ahead and construct mine into rows first, my first 2 points that I'm going to need to pin are where these two come together and these two come together. And then when I'm putting my rows together, I'm going to need to worry about this juncture and this juncture. So I hope that makes sense. So let me show you how I go about pinning. Okay, so that juncture we want to bring together is this point here. And I'm going to use my Quilting Pins Fine by Clover. I absolutely love these. I've talked about these earlier on in our session. They're nice and long, so they give me the capability of, when I'm pinning, to keep my hand further back, especially during left-handed pinning, which we'll talk about in a moment. But also when I'm doing this precision pinning, the extra length gives me the capability to ensure that my pin is straight. So let me show you how that works. So what's really important is that I match this pin to this pin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to put my pin through where those thread cross. So just like that. I'm going to check around the front, make sure. And then that's going to match up with this point. So I'm going to go ahead in and put my pin. Now once I have that, I'm then going to turn this over, and hopefully you can see this. And I'm going to hang it over the edge so that I can keep my pin straight. I want to keep that straight. So as I hang this over the edge, I'm going to come in with 2 other pins. Just going to make sure my edges are lined up first. So I'm going to go ahead and put in a pin there, and you'll notice I'm pinning left-handed. and then a pin in there. You can do this by pinning right-handed and then turning your unit around, but it's really important to have this hanging over the edge. All right, so I'm going to come in with my 2 pins, and I don't need to get right up on it, but within like a 1/4 inch of it. All right, and then I'm going to pull this out. Now this is ready for sewing. All right, so I just transferred this over so that I can capture the see it, flip it, sew it along with sewing. So I already have this one pinned. I showed you that just a few minutes ago. So I'm going to take this one, see it, flip it, and sew it. So in this unit, I don't really need to pin, but I am going to take the time to line up my edges. Got my needle down. I've checked my 1/4 inch seam, which is really important. All right, so now it's time for this one. So here you see I have the left-handed pinning and my pins are really back far, so that I don't need to get my hand close to the needle, and I can sit here and just with my thumb pull these glass head pins back to clear my 1/4 inch seam. So you don't even really, if you're right-handed and you've gone ahead and done all your pinning this way, and then you turn it around, you don't need to get to the point where you can pull with your left hand, although I would say it will work if you build up your muscle. But you just have to have enough capability in your thumb to push that pin back. So I'm going to get this underneath. I'm going to put a stitch or 2 in. And now I can go ahead and just pull this back. I've cleared my 1/4 inch seam field. I'm going to keep coming through. And then these, I'm going to get them a little closer. So see, by using the left-handed pinning, it's allowing me to get all the way to here before I pull this back or out. I'm going to go ahead and pull it out. And then I can come on through, and I'm checking to make sure I'm hitting that crosshair of a thread that I went ahead and matched perfectly. Now I can pull this pin out. And then here. And again, you don't want to run over pins. The pin can take it. Your needle might break. That's not your big problem. Your big problem is that you taken out the timing on your sewing machine, and that's several $100s. All right, so we're going to see it and flip it. Match it up and go ahead and stitch it. And I will keep doing that for the rest of the units, matching up my, my rows and putting them together. Okay, so I'm over here at the pressing station, and I've moved over to my big board because we have some serious ironing to do, which would be one of my comments that sometimes, especially at retreats, I see a lot of folks using their little iron to press open their seams for their blocks, and it's probably not as powerful as it needs to be. So something that we're going to get familiar with today is what I lovingly call the big stick. It's called a seam stick, and it will change your pressing completely, especially when pressing the units open. So they come in 3 sizes. I think I have all 3 in stock currently. There's the 16 inch, the 24 inch, and the 32 inch. The 32 inch, of course, costs a little bit more to ship, but these are phenomenal. I love my 16 inch when I'm working with my units and my blocks. Larger blocks, like I have one currently, a Twisted Twine that's in testing. That's a 15 inch block, so the 24 inch works a little bit better when putting that block together. And then the 32 works phenomenal when we go to put all of our rows together. So these are something that you definitely want to invest in. They last, they're wooden. I recommend the wood versus the padded. The padded are really plastic inside, and you know, I switched because students were burning the padding on it, and then I felt I had to constantly buy new ones because I felt like I couldn't take a burnt one to class. And so when I saw these at Quilt Market, I was like, these are great, they won't burn, but there's an added bonus in that they act similar to a clapper, in that, a tailor's clapper, in that they will absorb the steam. When you use steam, it'll wick it away from the block, creating a nice crisp seam. All right, so let's get started. So our unit that we just pinned, put these under here, they fit under there nicely. All right, so we have our unit that we pinned, and in fact we're going to press all of our seams open if you follow along in your booklet. The most important one, of course, is the one that we had to do our tricky pinning with, which was this one. So I'm going to go ahead and set my seam. I'm then going to put it over the stick, and I'm going to come in here where I have the most threads and do a little finger press. And then I'm going to take my iron and come in there, and this allows you to rock, so you can actually push the seam back further than even the straight position, which gives you a nice open seam. And then I'm going to turn it around and press. Give it a little steam there. And you'll see how that's come together really nicely. So I'm going to do that with all of these. Get in there and finger press. Come in there with the iron. Again, you can do a little rock, and you can see the steam will wick into the stick and give this is nice and dry. And it gives us a nice flat seam there. Start to see this coming together. Go ahead, finger press, and then press. All right, so I'm ready to take that back to the sewing table. Okay, so I've put my rows together, and now I'm going to put the rows together to form the block. Now I lay it all back out to make sure that everything has been sewn together properly. My pinks are all coming towards the center, and they're anchoring the four corners. You can see here my diamond matches up with my V block. There's a thread or two extra there, which I am totally cool with. We talked about that last week. I'd rather do that than drop a point. In fact, I find if you have thicker fabric, it makes sense to come one thread in so that when you're done pressing, even with the stick, thicker fabrics, sometimes it looks like you've dropped the point when you haven't because they're so thick. This happens to be pretty thin fabric. I love it. It's Art Gallery. I'd rather have this than a point dropped. It's like a thread or two. And you can see here that they match here against the V block. And then my V block unit once had the little ledges on the bottom. They weren't to an exact point, and that's because once I come in with my 1/4 inch seam, you'll notice they're a 1/4 inch back. So this looks great. So I am ready to sew together my rows. So typically what I do is I'll go ahead and put this row aside. I'll turn this around, and then I'm going to see it, and I'm going to flip it, and now is the time I need to pin. So let me just scoot this out of here for a second so you can just focus on this one. So again, I have my points coming together here, right? My anchor point is this one here that I need to make sure is matching. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same pinning that I did the last time, matching that up. Now I'll also, because we pin these open, I'm going to go ahead and line them up matchy matchy because I don't have a nest, and I'm going to come in here and pin a little ways back. And that's the other great thing about these pins, is they can grab a good amount and not have as much bulk sitting there on the pin. All right, this one I'm going to have on top so that I can see my seam. All right, and then I'm going to do the same over here. I'm going to match this up, seam to seam. Come in and put my 2 pins. That'll keep it from coming apart as well. Also, reducing your stitch length also helps a lot too. So often I will bring my stitch length down to 1.8 or 1.5, depending on the machine. All right, so I have all of this all matchy-matchy, and now I'm going to hang over the edge my unit here, and I'm going to keep my pin nice and straight, just like in the last part, and then come in with my 2 pins, excuse me, to keep that together. So you can see here either my V-block was a little short or my square was a little long, but this will ensure that when I hit this crosshair that I'm hitting the other. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put my needle down, and I'll usually remove this guy as soon as I get in here, and I usually put my foot down so I keep it in there. All right, so I'm going to come across. I can see this little crosshair. I'm going to make sure that I'm lining up pretty closely with that. And I'm coming over here. I'm about to hit that pin. So now is the point where I can either pull it back or take it all the way out. I don't mind taking them all the way out. All right, so here's where I have this is slightly shorter. It looks like I gypped myself a little bit on that V-block trimming, which happens, unfortunately, to some of us. So this is a good example of what to do. And I have it pinned to my square underneath. That's a thread or 2 deep, remember. So I'm just going to bring my 1/4 inch foot in just a scant in from the edge of that square, because I know that is just a thread or 2 thick. All right, and I'm going to put that and then come on through, and then by the point I get through, now my 1/4 inch ledge is back lined up with my outer unit there. And I'm going to go ahead and remove that pin, come across, move that pin, make sure this is nice and lined up, and I'm going to hit that little crosshair thread there, or just be a thread or 2 in. I'm at my end. All right, so I'm going to keep working through these, and then I will catch you back up when we get to the pressing. All right, we're back here for more pressing fun. All right, so we just came through and we matched up our points there. So typically before I go ahead and iron, I just give it a little peekaboo. And yes, I'm satisfied with that. So I'm going to set my seam. This is when you'll really see the true bonus factor of the stick, in that when I put this over the stick and come in here with my finger pressing, when I come through with the iron, I am not going to upset any of these seams down here, because my iron is so much higher than those units, which is why the high curve of this particular stick, it's a little deeper than the strippy sticks that have the batting on them as well. So here I can just come in, do a little rock, flip it over, give it a nice press from the front, and those exchanges are flat. All right, let me go put my last row on. All right, one more press for this block. All right, we're going to set our seam again. Get a nice good press. Over the stick we go. Got to come in here and finger press. Just be careful with the steam. Ask me how I know. But usually I can time it pretty good. Give that a nice press. Let that steam get wicked in by the stick. All right, nice press from the front. And now is when I will come in with my mister and just give it a nice press. So I pressed when I prepared my fabric, or I best pressed with the mister when I prepared my fabric, when I finished the unit prior to cutting, and now once I put the block together. How ta-da is that? Alright, so we've successfully sewn together and pressed our Bloom V-Star block. So we started off with our V-block units and our petal squares, and we've put together our Bloom V-Star block with our points matchy-matchy using our precision pinning, and then nice and flat using our pressing stick, the big stick as I like to call it. Anyhow, you are going to make 2 of each of these in 2 of each of your assorted brights. So you're going to net 16 of them. That's this week's assignment. I know some of you are ahead and some of you are behind. So just take it as you can, do what you can each day, each week. But I hope if you're ahead, you're listening in on the tips, and maybe you might have wished you waited to hear my tips. Anyhow, hopefully you've taken a class with me and you're all squared away and set. But next week we're going to talk about putting together our 5 diamond, and then I also want to talk to you about cutting your setting squares and your corner squares to prepare for the following week when we put this all together. Okay? So have a great week, everyone.